Okay, so I thought I would do kind of an example video about how you could talk about your topics for 3 minutes each as a way of exploring sort of what you know about those topics. So I picked knitting and crocheting, the Gay Straight Alliance, which is a club that I run at Windsor, and statistical analysis of real-time events, which is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So those are my 3 topics, and I would strongly encourage you to write down your 3 topics before you start your video. So you should have your 3 topics, you should have your 3-minute timer, and you should have somewhere in front of you some of the questions just in case you kind of get stuck. So I wrote down all of the questions that were in your assignment description um, just to keep me on track. Okay, so let's get started. So my first topic was knitting and crocheting, and here goes my 3 minutes. So I first got into knitting and crocheting when I was in the 10th grade. I learned how to knit from a book, and I really loved it because it's a really soothing way to kind of create something while at the same time sort of doing something that's not very stressful, or at least it wasn't for me after I learned how to do it. Of course, learning a new thing is always stressful. I learned how to crochet when I was in college. I took a student taught course, and then I decided to teach a student taught course on knitting, and that's sort of how I got into teaching, actually. So knitting and crocheting has always been kind of a personal um, important thing for me because it's how I got into teaching, and that's like a huge part of my identity. So um, that's knitting and crocheting, uh, and how I first discovered it. So the most interesting thing that I know about knitting and crocheting is you can use crocheting to model hyperbolic planes. And actually there's like a lot of research on that, and it's really cool. And they use it to model corals and stuff like that. So there wasn't actually, a consistent way to model hyperbolic planes before people started modeling them with crochet. So, that's really cool. Uh, what's one way I can use what you know? So a couple of things that I could do with knitting and crocheting, I could knit or crochet for charity. I could teach other people about knitting and crocheting. I could further explore, what those 2 things mean to me personally. All right, how could you find out more about this topic? Actually, I could take classes. They have lots of classes on knitting and crocheting, just kind of in the community. I could do a lot of, oh gosh, 3 minutes is a long time. I could do a lot of research kind of online. I could look at different patterns. I could try new things. All right, some things that I want to find out more about. So I definitely want to find out more about hyperbolic crochet because it's really cool. I also would want to find out more about maybe looking into crocheting for babies, like if there's something specific that is good for them, because a lot of my cousins are having babies right now, and it would be cool to crochet something for them. I've only got 3 seconds left. Okay. So that was my first 3 minutes. Let's try this. All right, new topic. The Gay Straight Alliance. The Gay Straight Alliance is a club that I started at Windsor 2 years ago. In, oh gosh, what year is it? In like 2016, I think, 2017. No, it would have had to been. Anyway, I started a couple years ago at Windsor, and it's really taken off as a club. I think it's important for kids who are going through, questioning their gender identity or questioning their sexuality to have like a safe space to talk about that in a safe way. And that's part of the reason why I created the club. I also think it's important for kids to get involved in advocacy, social advocacy, political advocacy, and that's another reason why I started the club. But mostly it's about having a safe space. So the Gay Straight Alliance meets like once a week, and we talk about different things, and the club is still kind of evolving and growing and developing its own identity, which I think is really important anytime you have a student organization. So how could I find out more about this topic? So there's actually a national Gay Straight Alliance organization that we're technically a sub-charter of, and I've been looking into some of the things that they do. They actually have a conference in Atlanta that I really want to go to, but it's very expensive and would require a lot of paperwork. And we kind of need to develop more as an organization before we do something like that and associate it with something bigger. So what is one way you can use what you know? So one of the ways that I can use what I know about GSA is I can definitely use it to reach out to other students and other student populations and kind of develop a platform for sharing student experiences, which I think is really important when it comes to developing a population and making sure that they have the right for social advocacy and they have those skills where they can talk about their rights and their responsibilities as a group. So what are some things that you want to find out more about? So personally, I think that GSA gives me a really good kind of segue into finding out more about the history of homosexual advocacy, which I think is important because it kind of puts us in like a history of standing up for people's rights and that sort of thing. And I think that's a really important kind of moment to begin for my kids too. Okay. All right. Last but not least, the statistical analysis of real-time events. So let's talk about that for 3 minutes. All right, so my experience with this is I actually have a degree in statistics and from like a really good university. Like we did statistical research and that sort of thing to get that degree. So, I have some expertise in it. And it's been really interesting to see kind of the types of displays and the types of information that people are coming up with to sort of make sense of COVID-19. So one thing that was really interesting to me is that if you look at the Georgia, daily updates, there was this big like hype, at least amongst my fellow statisticians who I went to college with, like when they changed the color coding kind of really subtly and just out of the blue, they changed the color coding so that, all of the cases were shifted, the case numbers were shifted. And it makes sense a little bit because you kind of get a sense of the exponential growth of the disease, but it also doesn't make sense because it makes it look like things are getting better when they're really not. So that was kind of like a unique moment where you could look at it from an educated perspective and be like, this is not a cool thing to do to people when it comes to their expectations about information. But one really great thing that the Georgia Department of Public Health did was they displayed information about cases per capita, which was really scary information, but was important information for people to have. So the cases per capita information and their decision to display that by county and like how they did it, that was really responsible. And well, I won't say really responsible because it leads to a whole bunch of other kind of ethics things. But I thought it was really good for them to display that data that way. And I think that looking at data displays and how people think about data, especially in light of COVID-19 and with that kind of as a lens, would be a really interesting thing to do. Like, I don't have necessarily the time to do it right now, but if I did, that would be a really cool thing to look at. And so I'm really sort of excited about seeing that play out as time goes on, because a lot of the types of numbers and the types of statistics that we're using to analyze this phenomena are really new. Okay, that was my 3 minutes. All right, so clearly there are some of these things that are a little bit more fleshed out than others. And then so your last minute of your video should be about you kind of thinking about the 3 things that you talked about and which ones you might consider pursuing more. So I'm clearly way more interested in statistical analysis than I ever thought I would be. And if I were to pursue something with GSA, it probably would be more about the history of social movements, the social movement of advocacy, rather than the organization itself, because that's kind of where my conversation went. And then if I were to do something with knitting and crocheting, it would probably be about hyperbolic crochet, because I was really excited about that. I am really excited about that. And so that's kind of my last minute, is I'm talking about like what about each of those 3 topics I was actually excited about when I talked about them. So that's the end of my video. I hope that helped you get to know me a little bit better, and also helped you figure out what you want to do for your video. It doesn't have to be crazy, just 10 minutes of you talking. And I hope you guys are having a lovely and safe time.